name your price. On everything I love, I give up everything I like. Everything was wrong, I'm just trying to get it right. He brought me out the dark, I'm just trying to be the light. Name your price, name your price, name your price, name your price. God sent me, I'll be headed there tonight. Jesus paid it all in blood, I'ma pay it with my life.
With the price, I'ma pay that. Run it though, 100-fold on the payback. Anything you could take away, he could bring back. Let us make something clear. Devil run nothing here. Earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof in here. Mr. I cut an ear, chuck a spear, look at here. Slingshot, clean rock, bucking at the puppeteer. Sword on the dash, wave a flag like a buccaneer. If it's coming, let it come already. It could have popped off and been done already. The enemy acting like he won already, but the victory belongs to the son already. If it sound like I'm ready for wars, cause I am no armor of the Lord on me, GOM camo. Cannon in my hand, it is written for the ammo. Lambana, bandana, red letter Rambo. Rep from the church to the bando. We don't need a band, no. We can praise with a tambourine and a banjo. You don't understand, he is the I am, so give him what he asked for.
Name your price, name your price, name your price. On everything I love, I give up everything I like. Everything was wrong, I'm just trying to get it right. He brought me out
to Rightly Dividing the Word. So we're going to begin with part 2 of Sola Scriptura, which simply means scripture alone, and hopefully I establish why we use scripture alone. But because I did read to you John 21:25, which stated that Jesus did so much that there are many other books, not books, but all the things that he did, not any one book could contain them. It actually said not all the books of the world could contain what he did. So, can't talk about Sola Scriptura because a lot of people always ask, well, why our book? Aren't there other books out there that were written? And so the answer to that is yes. And so can't talk about Sola Scriptura without talking about the Apocrypha. And so the Apocrypha only means works outside the accepted canon of Scripture. So when we look at this, the Roman Catholic Church has more books in their Bible than we do. The Greek Orthodox, they have more. The Russian Orthodox, they have more. The Coptics have more. So, but once again, as Protestants, we use a certain number of books, but we're not going to go into that on this lesson. But we're going to move forward with, there are also New Testament Apocrypha. And here's just to give you an idea of some other books that were out there. Arabic Gospel of Infancy, Armenian Gospel of Infancy, Bartholomew's Book of the Resurrection of Christ, the Gospel of Bartholomew, the Gospel of Basilides, the Gospel of the Birth of Mary, Gospel according to the Hebrews, History of Joseph and the Carpenter, so forth and so on. So remember in the first lesson I said that for our New Testament canon, those books were written before 120 AD. So something to note here, most of the books here were written after that time. All right. And so this is just a side note, So the further we got away from Jesus' death, the later books became more fanciful, more magical. So I suspect that's why the early church councils left them out. But not going to go there. But we're going to move on. So I want to talk about something because it just says works outside the accepted canon of Scripture. So I'll give you an example of how the Jews, they use something called the Talmud. And the Talmud is a textual record of generations of rabbinic debate about law, philosophy, biblical interpretation compiled between the 3rd and 8th centuries and structure a commentary on the Mishnah. So, just like in the Old Testament, we don't use the Talmud or even draw from it because it is a commentary, a commentary, a commentary. So keep that in mind. Works outside the accepted canon. So a lot of pastors today, they was like, oh, when you try to bring up books from the Apocrypha, they quickly shut it down like, oh, those not all accepted books. But yet they would do something like this. They would tell you about certain biblical commentaries, certain biblical commentaries. And remember the Talmud, which is accepted by most Jews as secondary text, but we won't accept it at all in any other outside books. We quickly shut it down, but yet we introduce biblical commentaries. We continue biblical commentaries. So, and no matter how good or how great they are, they still of works outside the accepted canon. So I'm gonna take it even a little further because once again, um, although many people say we use the scriptures only, we use the scriptures only, but they don't. They really don't. And like I said, point in case, they use commentaries. But even beyond that, they use their own books or other contemporary Christian books. Although they might be great books, but at the end of the day, they are outside the accepted canon. And you will see many preachers, bishops, or whatnot, they will quote from books of other people or even their books in the pulpit, but yet if you came to them about the book of Thomas, they would shut that down quickly, but they would not shut down their books. Works outside the accepted canon. So it should be what's good for the goose is good for the gander. But I'm gonna leave that right there. But this is something I want you to know of why we use our Bible and our Bible alone. And so you still might say, well, what about all these other books? What about all these other books? So I'm gonna give it to you this way. All right. So let's talk about algebra. So many of us taken algebra in high school, and if you can see here, you know, you still have to know addition and subtraction. But many of us take it. But let me go even further. Linear algebra, man. Linear algebra is a study of linear combinations. It is a study of vector spaces, lines, planes, and some mappings that require to perform the linear transformation. It includes vectors, matrices, and linear functions. It is a study of linear sets of equations and transformation and properties. So let me go back. So this is how many of us, when we talk about these extra books and want to read these outside books, we're jumping the gun, meaning we don't even know the basic fundamental principles of our own book, which our Bible is all we need is the basic fundamental principles for what we need to know God or begin to try to understand Him. But yet, and still, many of you all want to start off in linear algebra. So let me tell you this. I never got to linear algebra in school. I'll tell you why. In order to take linear algebra, you have to first take algebra. Then you have to take calculus, and you're talking about years of calculus just to get to where you can understand linear algebra. So that's how we're treating the Bible with outside sources You're trying to get an understanding well above your level of understanding before you even get the basic principle first. So that's why we don't need outside books. We need to get the basic fundamentals first. And I'm going to tell you, people, it will take a lifetime to do that. So start there, and it is sufficient. It really is sufficient. It's all we need to know. Sola Scriptura, Part 2.
Hey, it's hard to stay clean when your environmented mind's dirt. Gangsta in retirement. Realized I was blinded up in my prior work. God's grace opened my eyes up to the Messiah's birth. But I could still go wired up if it gets high alert. The streets is crummy, a sleazy slum for the diseased and hungry. They teach the young how to squeeze a bunny for easy money. The even in they cerebral be speakers saying they need the money. They'll treat you unequal if you ain't feeding your greedy tummy. Dealing with depression, he tired of getting stepped on. Chunks the hood with his right hand and got Teflon in his left palm. This I'ma even step wrong, get crept on and stretch long. That West song hit you and leave you twitching and with your chest gone. For us, it was held in Christ, bore with no question. You could trust the nails that he wore was no press on. Song of life, my ballad's hard. It's kinda like a salad bar, except I'm getting my lettuce with no dress on. You think that I give a rip about a hypocrite? I hit a lick, you hit a chick. It's all we can